Hey guys, welcome to episode 23 of Trek Live. In this episode, we're going to be talking about our favorite alien species. Um, with To do that, Bill and I brought on a special guest. I'd like everybody to welcome Rob onto the Trek Live. How you doing today, Rob?
Hi guys, not too bad, thanks. How are you?
Welcome, Rob.
Pretty good, pretty good. Excited to talk about some alien species.
Yeah, very excited.
Absolutely.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thank you for coming, Rob. Appreciate you taking time and stopping by.
Looking forward to it.
So as we usually, go ahead.
Yeah, you can go.
Yeah, as we usually start, we talk about what we've watched in recent days since the last time we did this. So, Rob, let's start with you. Have you watched much Star Trek, say, in the last week?
What have I watched? I've watched nothing like on that in order, kind of like
Yeah.
randomly. So I've watched some Voyager, watched some DS9. What was I watching in Voyager? The Void.
Oh, yes.
I was listening to.
Excellent choice.
Yes.
I watched it again because I was listening to one of the Trek FM podcasts, and it's To the Journey was on The Void, so I've been watching that, and I've been trying to watch, trying to get into the original series because I haven't really watched much of that, so I'm trying to get into that. Yeah.
Very cool. The Void's
How
a
about you
classic.
guys?
Dan, what about you?
I
My
had
answer's
watched last night. I decided because I had a busy week, so I couldn't watch a lot. So last night I watched Chosen Realm. That's season 3, episode 12 of Star Trek Enterprise. Still making my run through my rewatch. It was a middle of the road episode, I'd have to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. Agree.
What about you? Did you just finished off some finished off your
Yeah,
rewatch?
I finished it before we streamed last week.
Oh, okay.
So no, I actually have not watched anything in this week. I'm taking a little bit of a break, getting ready for Discovery, and I watched a couple movies, completely non-Trek related. But as far as Trek content goes, it's been kind of light, and I probably going to keep it that way leading into Discovery. I'm going to kind of try to leave that rewatch sitting there for a few weeks.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Good stuff. So, I guess the way we're going to do this topic is going to be a little bit of a homage to the great Trek Ranks podcast. We're going to do like a top 5 alternating choices, and we're really looking forward to it. But I just want to throw that out there because we're going to talk about podcasts and stuff at the end, but our format is going to noticeably be similar to theirs, and yeah, that's because they do it the best, and we love them. So, yeah.
Which you guys should all check out.
You should all check it out. They just put out a new one
Yeah.
yesterday, and I haven't gotten around to listening to it yet, but I can't wait on the Klingon episodes.
Yeah. I want to check that out too.
Yeah. So I guess we're going to start at number 5 and work our way up to number 1, and I'm sure we'll have some extras at the end. Just missed our cuts. But I think, Rob, since you're our guest, I think you should kick us off. So what is your number 5 top alien species?
I found it really hard to narrow the list down, and I was going back and forth trying to cut it down to 5. And I really wanted to include some not obvious alien species, but the more I thought about it, the more I couldn't really justify picking one-offs and leaving out the species that have had lots of detail, have been featured heavily. So I thought I'd at least put my number 5 as an alien species that doesn't feature much. And some people might think, why has he chosen that? But my number 5 is we don't actually know the species name other than what Seven calls it, which is species 116, and that's Arcturus from Hope and Fear in Voyager.
Oh,
Awesome.
yes.
He's I chose him. That's an episode I go back to time and time again. I must have rewatched that more than any other Voyager episode. I found his characters really interesting, and he's uber intelligent. His species have created a faster than warp speed travel with the quantum slipstream. They've created this really advanced holographic technology. I think they call it particle synthesis or something like that. So they're really, really clever. They're like expert linguists. So yeah, that was really interesting about him. And the fact that his species, well, we don't know whether his species are like it, but he's like it. He's really manipulative and deceptive, and he manages to deceive the whole Voyager crew into and preys on their hopes. And the fact that, again, we don't know if his species necessarily is, but we would assume so. They seem resistant to phaser fire, which I thought was quite interesting. So he gets phasered during the episode and doesn't really do anything to him. And they're quite unusual looking. They've got these really weird dome-shaped heads. Yeah. So I just thought he was a really interesting character, and he really brought. For me, he made that episode.
He did.
So yeah, that was a really interesting species for me. Not that we know the species name.
True.
That was my number 5, which is a bit of an odd one. It's a bit out there.
We love that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. It's a great choice. What about you, Dan? What's your number 5?
So my number 5 is also another Voyager pick. So kind of how I kind of made my picks for my list is just my personal favorites. So I do have some obvious choices, but I also have some like not so conventional. So which this pick is? So my number 5 is the Hirogen. I just like their. This will be kind of a common theme, but I like the sci-fi concept of their species. You know, they're an old species. They're nomadic. They're not all, warrior types. There's definitely some, different classes. I love the look. I love their, what they wear, like how they look as a species. And I think it reminds me of like Predator-esque, and I'm a big fan of, Predator and Alien and stuff like that, all that sci-fi stuff. So, yeah, and I really love the Hirogen episodes in Voyager, so that kind of swayed my choice. So that's my number 5, the Hirogen.
It's a nice pick.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
I especially like you said. I think Flesh and Blood in the 7th season kind of really fleshes them out in a sense of seeing those other classes having that like scientist Hirogen kind of adds some texture to their species, and their look is definitely really dynamic. I love like the first episode that really focuses on them hunters. When you get in their ship with the Hirogen crew, that set is intimidating. Yeah, it's scary.
Yeah,
it's really cool. It's different in a way that Trek doesn't always explore. So very cool.
And their sheer size, they're huge.
Yeah,
they're absolutely massive.
Yeah. Really good move, like casting tall, big actors and posing people.
Yeah.
So good choice, both of you. Good choices.
What about you, Bill?
Real quick, out to the chat real quick before I dive in. Welcome Ross and Danielle. Ross watched All Good Things and Caretaker, and that's quite a twosome back to back. And you're getting a shout out, Rob, for Species 116. It's a inspired choice for sure.
Yeah.
My number 5 is the Vidians from Voyager. And before I even dive into that, when I went to pick these 5, I tried to go with species that are fleshed out. And Rob, your choice was excellent and really inspired, but I tried to avoid like the one-offs, just because sometimes when it's a one-off, it sometimes to me can be more about the character than the species. That's true. It doesn't always work that way, but like for me, I was looking for like big, like impactful, and the Vidians are the least of the ones I chose in this way. They're pretty fleshed out. We get a decent amount of history to them. We don't see a ton of them, but I think of two things. I think of kind of two sides of it. The last, it's not the last scene, but towards the end of Phage, the scene in the transporter room between Janeway and the two Vidians. And the Vidians are like telling their history to Janeway about how they were like once artistic and prideful and civilized species, but they got ravaged by this disease, and it pushed them to go to some dark places to just survive. And I love the exploration of a species being pushed to the brink by medical challenges that are just insurmountable, seemingly, and seeing how far they'll go to just keep going. And then on the flip side of that, where you get a little bit of their humanity, in quotes, in Phage, where you kind of sympathize with them by the end of it a little bit, I think of Deadlock, which, Dan, you and I watched together, actually, where they are just terrifying to me. They are like relentless, and watching them just mow down the crew is crazy. Like they're really scary. They're the way that they go about just cold-bloodedly killing you and then taking your organs. Like it's just it's very different. Like it's like, uniquely just vicious for Star Trek.
Proper horror film stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Harvesting organs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've always been a pretty big Vidian fan. I wish we got a little more of them. We get a little bit in like Life Signs with the female scientist with the Doctor, and you get a little bit more texture to them, kind of like we did in Flesh and Blood with the Hirogen. Like another side to them, a little bit more of a friendly, like civilized side of the Vidians. And that's kind of it. Kind of like the Kazon, they kind of phase out after the first couple of seasons, and naturally so, and maybe for the best to not like overuse them and push too far. But I think with a little bit more development, if there's a little more meat there, I think they'd be even higher on my list, because I really do like them a lot in sort of limited time. And that's a good point, Ross. That's three straight.
Voyager round,
Voyager.
yes.
So,
We love
very cool.
Voyager getting some love.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my 5. Doubling back to you, Rob, for your number 4.
Sticking with the V's, my number 4 is the Vorta.
Whoa.
Okay.
Nice.
And again, it's hard not to hone in on a specific person, but I mean, to be honest, all the Vorta are just, they're such great characters. Weyoun, obviously, and the I think the other Vorta you see in Deep Space Nine, they're just so, they're cunning, they're devious, they're deceptive, they're intelligent, and their sense of humor, they're really witty and sarcastic, and I really like that. They're really quite funny. I'm sure they don't mean to be, but they're quite funny. And the fact that they're genetic, that they're clones, so you know that they can almost never be killed, and the founders can just keep on producing them. And the fact that we find out that the Vorta are, they can't be poisoned. They're resistant to poison. I'm sure in one episode, whoever it is tells Weyoun that there's poison in this drink, and he drinks it, and Dukat looks at him like, "What the hell are you?" So yeah, that's kind of cool. They can't be poisoned. Yeah, and I don't know. I think in the episode where we're introduced to the Vorta, you see them using. I don't know if the rest of them do, but you see the woman, the female Vorta that Sisko and Quark meet. Yeah, uses some sort of like telekinesis, uses like telekinetic powers. So we don't really see other Vorta doing that. So, but that was kind of a cool add to that species.
She must have been uniquely genetically built to have those sorts of abilities.
a special Vorta. So yeah, that's my number 4 pick.
Yeah, that's an awesome pick.
Really good pick.
Yeah,
definitely.
Actually, I was going to say, and also like their appearance is really cool. I like their the sharp colours in their eyes, and they have like a purplish tinge around their ears. It's really they've got a really interesting aesthetic. I really like the way they look.
Not just a forehead. Yeah.
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 Mhm.
Just
Very cool.
Yeah.
That's fair. Real quick before you go, Dan, Ross says that we could have had a real Cronenberg body horror episode on Voyager with the Vidians. That's a. I think they started to go down that road a little bit with Phage, a little
yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
It turns into more of like a character drama. But yeah, that's a good point. If they were around longer and they were more willing to play around with them, I'm sure that's the direction they would have gone. But
Yeah.
yeah. What's your number 4, Dan?
So my number 4 is the Andorians. I wanted to give some Enterprise love.
Yeah.
Just I feel like, especially with Enterprise, when you start to get into the Andorian episodes, there's this great scene, where it's it's this great shot where it's just kind of in the shadows and there's some light shining through, and then Shran, Jeffrey Combs' character, steps in, and it's just the antennas, and you're just like, yes, you know it's happening, you know it's there. So every time I see that shot, I'm like, yes, awesome. And I think Jeffrey Combs kind of makes the Shran character. I love um, the kind of dynamic between the Andorians and the Vulcans. I think that's a great conflict. Very interesting.
Absolutely.
So, and I don't know, I love the Andorians because they're quick trigger. They're
Hmm.
kind of, I don't know, a little hot headed, and I just kind of enjoy that and seeing how Archer kind of deals with the Vulcans and the Andorians. So that's why it's on my top
Absolutely.
5 and at number 4. So yeah.
Yeah, I think my favorite thing about the Andorians, real quick, especially in Enterprise, is that there is no excuse for like that visual look in 2001, 2002 to work. Like it's
Yeah.
such a goofy idea, like
Yeah.
blue people with antenna.
But it
But
works.
it's
Yeah.
totally fine. Like when
Yeah.
you see them, it's totally believable, and they just totally pull it off. The actors, the way that the makeup works.
Mhm.
I love that the antenna move with their emotions. It's
Yeah.
it's awesome. It's really cool, and there's no reason for it to work, but it somehow does.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally. Shran's amazing. He's one of Enterprise's uh, best achievements for sure. He's a great character. I love his
Mhm.
dynamic
Yeah.
with Archer. I love his little moments with the Paul, like just brief little stuff. They never really go there with exploring that.
Yeah.
But when they have little back and forths, it's always good. So that's an inspired another really good pick.
Yeah.
And I
Definitely.
see the chat is concurring with you.
Yeah.
A lot of love for Shran, a lot of love for Jeffrey Combs, a lot of love for the
Yeah.
Andorians.
It's
So,
funny. It's like a Jeffrey
good pick.
Combs round.
Yeah, we got the Jeffrey Combs round. I'm gonna break that, but yeah, so far,
Oh.
very cool. Um,
What's your number 4, Bill?
my number 4 is gonna be the Bajorans. So I'm kind of getting into like more
Okay.
hefty, like linchpins, alien species territory here. Uh, yeah, I guess the Bajorans have to be on my list because they're so integral to Deep Space Nine. They're like a pillar to that show. They're so present. Uh, they're kind of the backbone dramatically to it. Almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very funny, Ross.
I was laughing at that also. That was a good one, Ross.
Clever. Yeah, so they're so important to the success of that show, and I love that we get
Definitely.
different different angles of them. Like they're not all uniform. They're not all the same. We get different political ideologies. We get different religious belief systems. We get all sides of this society by staying in one place, kind of in their system, in their solar system, orbiting their planet, kind of. So I think of episodes like the 3-parter at the beginning of season 2, the Homecoming, the Circle, the Siege. That's so like a deep dive into the Bajoran history and their political situation that is kind of unique to the Bajorans. We don't really ever get that deep into how a society works, and I just love the history of the occupation and what it alludes to before the occupation, the type of people the Bajorans were and how they've risen from the occupation. We get Ro and Kira, who are kind of similar, like ex-resistance fighters who are tough as nails, strong characters. But you also have, Kai Wynn, who's like this conniving political leader, who's very different. She comes from a different place. So all these people don't come from the same place. And I love that. So, and they're so, like I said, they're so present through Deep Space Nine. They're important from Emissary to what you leave behind. You can't take them out of Deep Space Nine. You can't do Deep Space Nine without the Bajorans. So they had to be on my list, and I could probably make a case that they should be higher on my list. But for now, they're number 4.
Yeah, I think they're just such a complicated species that it adds such depth, and I think that's super important in making an awesome species, for sure.
Yeah.
That's kind of my theme. Complicated.
It'd be quite easy to almost forget about the Bajorans because they appear, because they appear a bit vanilla, a bit, normal. But actually, they're really quite deep. They've got a lot of history, culture, and like you say, they're all so very different. It's not the Bajorans are all good soldiers or that they've all suffered. You've got the deceitful, deceptive ones. You've got the ambitious, conniving ones. You've got the loyal, faithful ones. They're a really interesting species. They almost went on my list.
There's too many to pick.
There's way too many.
It's unlikely to have much crossover. We might have some towards the top, I would think, but there's so many great choices, and a lot of the ones you guys just have already picked in the first 2 for both of you are like not even ones I wrote down, but are very worthy of, or just as worthy as anything I wrote down, which tells you how many there are. So back to you, Rob. You're number 3.
Number 3. So for my number 3 is a bit more conventional. It's I chose the Trill. In particular, joined Trill. Slightly more interesting as a species. I suppose they're all the same species, but the fact that the whole that the symbiote makes them really interesting. The fact that they've got several lifetimes worth of experience and knowledge and skills makes them really interesting, and they give us one of the best DS9 characters in my opinion, which is Dax, Jadzia and Ezri Dax. So and the fact that their symbiotes make them almost immortal, so their memories will live on, and obviously until the symbiote dies. Again, their appearance is quite cool with the spots down the side, and I like the whole exploration of their. I mean, there was that episode where Jadzia has, I think, is it an initiate, and she has to train him. So we find out about the process of being picked for a symbiote. We find out about the keepers of the symbiotes, how they look after them. And I mean, Jadzia is just an amazing character anyway. The fact that she's has this symbiote makes her, she's intelligent, she's loyal, she's a skilled fighter. She's got all the memories of our host. So she's essentially a gymnast, a diplomat, a Federation science officer. So she's kind of an all-in-one because of what the symbiote and the knowledge that it gives her. So absolutely. I thought the Trill are a really interesting species. That's my number 3 choice.
So that's a great call. And Ross is asking us, I'm going to double back in a second too to his 5 and 4. He's writing down his choices too. But he asked a really interesting question. If you had the choice to be joined, would you go for it? If you were a Trill, would you want to be a joined Trill? What do you guys think?
I would.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that would be awesome.
my only hesitation is whether it would kind of mute your own character, your own personality.
I think it would.
But where I don't know, is it that it would mute it or that it would enhance it? It would be part of other personalities.
Yeah, it would add to it, I think.
Yeah. So I think I'd want to be joined.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do too. I think the Ezri Dax's character does a really good job of showing us the downside to it, the challenges of becoming joined, because we see it right at the beginning, and it makes the choice more interesting than maybe it would have been if we never saw that. But I think it's worth it in the end. I'd trade in the the period of time getting used to it and coming to terms with all that stuff going on in my head to get all those shared experiences that have my experiences keep living on and helping somebody else down the road. So, yeah, I think it's a great choice because they are different and they're a great science fiction concept. They're a great idea, the Trill. And you're right, Jadzia is I think one of my favorite characters in Star Trek overall. Like if I was as audacious as Enterprise Extra and could rank every single character, Jadzia Dax would factor pretty highly on my list. I love her, and I love her more every time I watch the show. She wasn't always like necessarily like at the top of my Deep Space Nine ranks in terms of characters. Like I always loved her, but I don't know that I would have put her way at the top when I was first watching the show when I was younger. But the older I get, the more I love her. So great call. And
the more observant of you might have guessed that the Trill were going to be one of my choice because I'm wearing a Dax Dax pin.
Absolutely, yeah. Those pins are cool. Love fan sets. I need to get some of them.
Yeah, they're great. They're really good.
Doubling back real quick before we keep going, Ross named his 5 and 4, and for number 5 he picked the Voth from Voyager's Distant Origin, which is a really cool choice. Which is, kind of for me similar to the Andorians, like it's such a crazy concept that somehow works. His number 4 was the Suliban, which are also like really, really cool, inspired choice. They look great. I love their look. I think they're way underrated from a look standpoint. And I love my real quick before you guys get I'll turn it over to you guys. But my favorite thing about Suliban is that they are not in control. Like they are being manipulated. They're not bad because of their own choices. You know, the Suliban we see are like pawns, and I kind of like that too. They're not just mustache twirling, trying to play the chessboard to get more powerful or something. They're totally, being taken advantage of by something else.
Yeah, to me they're like almost an ultimate cheat. Like, oh, they can get cloaked or do 20 things with their body. Like it's an ultimate cheat character, which is makes for awesome episodes and also frustrating.
We have Enterprise Extra with us. He's joined us again, which is awesome. Thank you for coming. And we are totally homaging your show today with our top 5 breakdown of alien species. Our format is very similar to yours, Enterprise Extra. So
the royalties of being a post.
Yes, exactly. So I think you're up, Dan. You're number 3.
My number 3. Rob and I have uber similar lists with a Voyager pick and a Jeffrey Combs, and now the same. I also picked for my number 3 a Join Trill. I can't say anything more that you guys have already said. Great sci-fi concept, like Bill alluded to. I think many different lives kind of in one character makes for such a interesting character and very deep and hard to understand sometimes. But I think one thing that wasn't kind of touched on, the aesthetics. I think the spots are awesome. So just want to have my 2 cents there. But yeah, the Join Trill are my number 3.
Great. Yeah. Great call. My number 3 is the Cardassians. Kind of similar. I'm like, you guys know, I tend to go standard. I tend to go big with like the big linchpin species, linchpin episodes, whatever we're doing. But again, kind of similar to the Bajorans, very, very kind of along the same lines. I don't think Deep Space Nine could be told without the Cardassians. And the Cardassians, like the Bajorans, are really well explored. We get different angles of them. We get different political ideologies. We get Dukat, and we get the Gull from Second Skin, who's got like a totally different political thought process. Gull, I wrote it down, and I can't read my own handwriting, and I can't remember his name. So if anybody remembers,
is that Gamor? Is that Gamor?
Gamor.
Is that the one where Kira's like pseudo father?
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that he's a totally different political ideology about how the Cardassians should be moving forward and responding to like the occupation. and yeah, they're not all the same. We get everything from Dukat to that, and we get even like one-off characters like Gul Madrid from Chain of Command, who's like horrifying, and,
Yeah.
and it's such a you want to say evil, but like just a typically a Cardassian guy. You know, he's just doing what he knows to do.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I guess the character that probably puts him as high on this list as they are is Garrick. You know, Garrick is obviously just such a rich, and he embodies the Cardassians in such a big way. Like the complexity, the arrogance, but the pridefulness, it's all there in him. And then everybody else, I think, kind of surrounding him just adds to it. But I think Garrick on his own could almost lift the Cardassians. If he was like the only Cardassian we really knew, he would probably still lift the Cardassians into my list because of how complicated he is. But all the other characters that kind of come and go, Damar is way up there for me. In those last couple of seasons, I think you don't get much better than Damar, especially at the very end when he turns.
Yeah, I would also.
But again,
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I would also argue that with that, also Dukat, I love him because his character arc is almost like a roller coaster, you know. So I think he also just kind of deserves to be definitely on that list.
Certainly,
yeah.
I think when we did we do an episode on villains?
Yeah, I think so.
And I think we both picked Dukat as our number one.
Yep.
So our favorite Star Trek villain comes from this species, and a lot of great episodes that kind of lean on the Cardassians, even from TNG, which isn't like a Cardassian show like Deep Space Nine by any means. You know, The Wounded is one of my favorite episodes. I love what they do with The Wounded, what the Cardassians bring to that episode, and even in Voyager, I love Nothing Human. So they kind of like chime into these other shows, and we get little extra corners carved out. He literally murdered my dog. Yeah. Talking about the Damar Enterprise Extra. He did. Yeah. He certainly did do that. But
that always bothered me. How DS9 just neatly glossed over the fact that Damar is essentially a murderer. And we all suddenly love him by season 7. Myself included.
Yeah. He's like the hero by the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments from that last arc, though, is the scene right at the end. I think it's in the second to last episode of The Dogs of War, when Damar's family gets killed, and he's like reacting to it, and he's in shock, and he says something like, "Who would kill, a family or whatever? What kind of people would do that?" And Kira's like, "Yeah, right. What kind of people would do that?" And, and Garrett's like, "No, he needed to hear that."
Really rubbing the salt in the wounds.
But Garrick doesn't say, "Oh no, you should be sorry." She says, "No." He says, "No, he needed to hear that. That's something he needs to keep in his mind as he's trying to do this." It's amazing. I just love the richness. There's so much you could study the Cardassians and just build off of what we've seen and get even more rich and textured. They're a total triumph in Star Trek. Star Trek sometimes takes some heat for maybe having their alien species be a little bit. The word is not coming to mind, but they're all the same. Like they're all coming from the same place. Yeah.
The 4 every week.
Yeah. Yep. And not always like really fleshing out and not making them all one of a kind. And the Cardassians are certainly not that. We get all kinds. So tough even to have them at 3. They should be higher, but yeah. So we have some agreements. Danielle is saying that Cardassians are her number 1, which is cool. Yeah. And Ross, continuing his top 5, he also says the Cardassians are his number 3. So, yeah,
cool.
What do you got, Rob? Number 2.
Well, I kept quiet during your discussion of Cardassians because my number 2 pick is Cardassians.
Okay.
And yeah, you kind of covered it all. It's there's such a rich, diverse species, and the fact that you see so many different aspects of their culture, their species. You see scientists. You see Natima Lang, who's typically isn't your typical Cardassian. She's falls in love with a Ferengi. She's a scientist. She's not in the military. You see intelligence operatives. You see a dissident movement. You see the military. So it's just they're a really interesting species. They're cunning. They're devious, and again mainly Garrett and actually Dukat as well. They've got a really great sense of humor, really dry and witty. And even with, they give us great enemies and great villains through like Dukat. But even characters like Dukat, they're not straightforward enemies. They're enemies 1 minute, then they're an ally, then they're back to an enemy again, and you sympathise with them. I think is it Waltz where we see where Dukat is almost battling with his demons and trying to grieve his daughter's death. They're proud, they're arrogant, and even down to like aesthetics, like the way they look. So the design of I think they were referred to as like spoon heads. That's really cool. And their necks, they almost look reptilian. And in their architecture, the way that Deep Space Nine is built, or Terok Nor, their view screens, we see the shots, the wide shots of the architecture on Cardassia Prime. So they're just a great species. Great. Really interesting.
That's a great point about the architecture. That's like the whole just visual look of them, not just physically, but they're because of being on Deep Space Nine and spending time on Cardassia, you really even get a sense of what they, what their setting is, where they come from. Great call, great pick.
And again,
well
Garrett.
explained. Very cool. Dan, you're number 2.
So my number 2, this is where I go back to the expect these to be on the list. But for my number 2 is the Vulcans. I think in Star Trek they always get kind of misunderstood, like, oh, you guys don't have emotions. Well, no, it's kind of the opposite. They have, a lot of emotions, and they've chosen to kind of put a lid on those. But I love, I just love that, how their species is kind of, built around this logic, this idea, this thing, and it's been kind of interwoven in their kind of species and stuff like that. So I love that. I put it as a perfect balance of smart and logic, and they don't really care about anything else. So I think they're a really resourceful, really knowledgeable species. I think they have a lot of influence on humans, and a lot of they've been involved with humans a lot. So I like that dynamic, and there's just a lot of things about the species that have been fleshed out, over the many shows and many characters that have kind of touched on the Vulcans. So that's why I chose the Vulcans.
I have a feeling our lists are going to be the same from now on, Dan. 2 and 1. But my number 2 is the Vulcans.
Okay.
They are, for a lot of the reasons you just said, they're kind of like I just said about the Bajorans and the Cardassians being like integral linchpins to Deep Space Nine. The Vulcans are linchpins to Star Trek. Like Star Trek, I don't think Star Trek succeeds without Spock, so it doesn't succeed without the Vulcans. But it goes beyond that. They're very similar to those other species. Kind of my theme is like fleshed out, complicated history to these species, and the Vulcans are no exception. We know a lot about their history and why they are. The need to. They don't, like you said, people who are like kind of passively familiar with Star Trek kind of assume that, like I even hear it in interviews about Discovery when they interview like Sonequa Martin Green, and they're talking about, are you Vulcan? Do you have emotions? Well, all Vulcans have emotions.
Yeah.
It's like such a common misconception that people just assume that no, they actually have very strong emotions. They have stronger emotions than us. They have to, out of necessity, bury them, keep them suppressed, keep a handle on them, or they would be overcome. They wouldn't be able to function. So I love that. I love that. I love that they are like a stand-in for the introverts among us. You know, if you struggle with your own emotions and expressing yourself, you know, you will identify with Spock and Tuvok and T'Pol. Like their struggle is your struggle. So I love that, you know, unlike some other species that might represent like a society in our world that, you know, might, or a period in our history, you know, the Cardassians are certainly like a stand-in for like, you know, fascistic, you know, whoever you want to call it, the Nazis, whatever. The Romulans are kind of like the North Koreans of today, this closed, you know, society. And the Vulcans are us. It's just a certain type of person. So if you're not of that type, you probably know somebody of that type who struggles with those kinds of things. So, yeah, I just think they're integral to Trek. I think they're a part of Trek's identity, and that's why they keep going back to them. You know, they're kind of absent in TNG and Deep Space Nine for the most part, but in 3 of the shows, we have a main character who is Vulcan, and I think all 3 of those characters kind of come at it from a different angle and have a different background and, you know, bring something new. I think Spock, Tuvok, and T'Pol are all kind of very different characters and come from different points in Vulcan history. You know, T'Pol comes from a very different place than Spock does and Tuvok does. She's coming from a place of like learning, like literally learning about humanity and learning to appreciate and respect and be a part of the community. Where Tuvok is kind of been a part of it forever. You know, long Starfleet career, and so I just love that we get all different kinds of angles. Like I said about the other 2, the last 2 on my list, and of course, you know, a lot of classic episodes, especially from TOS. You know, Mock Time, Journey to Babel. You know, you can put in episodes to show somebody this is what the Vulcans are about. You know, if somebody wants to know and you want to show them what the Vulcans are about, you put in a Mock Time, and they will come away understanding that's the Vulcans. That's what that's why they are why they are.
Yeah.
So there's easy examples to pull from to kind of explain them, and I love that. So yeah, Trekker Prize, welcome.
Yeah,
I
welcome.
don't think you've ever been here before. So yeah, I think we're getting down to it.
We're getting down to
number
the
1
nitty-gritty.
choices. Yeah, are we all going to have the same number 1? That's the question.
No, definitely.
No.
You're not
Dan and I
going to agree. You're not going to agree with mine at all.
Hey.
I think I might cause some controversy.
That's good. We love controversy. What do you got? What's your number 1?
So my number 1, my favorite alien species is the Kazon. No, I'm only kidding.
Whoa.
That would be a choice.
It's not too far off that. I think it's already been picked. My top choice is the Vidians.
Very cool.
I think
Awesome.
I think they're just such a really interesting species. So they're great choices for villains. The way they look, they're terrifying. It's almost like zombies, like, you know, flesh-eating diseases. And the fact that, you know, it conjures up these images of, you know, these creatures that come and harvest your organs in the night. They're just they're just gruesome, terrifying aliens. And I like the reason for their villainy, the reasons they're so, well, we perceive them as evil. It's they're trying to survive. They're desperate, and it makes you wonder what we would do if we were faced with a similar, you know, a disease wiping out our species. Would we be so, you know, honourable and noble, and, you know, or would we actually do everything we possibly could to survive, which included killing other people? Yeah. I think every single episode they're in is just brilliant, almost without fail. You know, we've got where they're introducing the phage. Is it Faces, where the Vidians divide up B'Elanna and get her,
Oh,
her
yeah.
into Klingon and human. Life Signs, where we meet a good Vidian, and Deadlock, which is just a brilliant. It's one of my favorite episodes. If only for where the Vidians come onto the bridge, and Janeway just gets up and says, "Welcome to the bridge," and there's the countdown to the explosion.
I love that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite moments.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And I think that the fact that they give us, we don't see her much, but the fact that they give us Denara Pell, they give us a love interest for the Doctor. That's really cool. And that we get, I think it could have been used more, which would have been great. But I like the bit in Think Tank where we hear that the Think Tank helped cure the phage. I think it would have been so cool to go back and see them. I mean, we don't see a huge amount of their society, their culture, but we know that they were prosperous, people before they were blighted by the disease. But I like that little touch that we go back to them. But it would have been cool if we could have gone back to them more.
Yeah.
But that's my number one pick, which is a bit unusual. I know it's not the Klingons, the Vulcans, the Borg, but yeah, that's my favorite.
I don't disagree with anything you said. They were on my list, and they're a really cool choice, outside the box, like number one choice. But they're unique. They're cool. They're very different, like I said in when I talked about them. So great pick.
Yeah, some more Voyager love.
Yeah, lots of Voyager love.
Yes.
Makes Dan happy.
Yep.
We've picked a lot of species beginning with V. There's something to do with that letter. Vorta, Vidians, Vulcans, Voth.
The Voth. Ross picked the Voth.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What do you got, Dan? Your number one. I think I know the answer, but
my number one is the most this species. I wish I could be this species. I chose as my number one the Klingons. I love the culture, their traditions, outfit, weapons, batlets are so awesome. And I think everything fits there it's so well. I love the food, the drink, blood wine, their ship designs. Oh, it's so Klingon. It's so awesome. I think it's one of the most fitting, combinations for a ship to species that almost all of Star Trek. We kind of talked about this kind of during a Star Trek Online stream, but one thing I don't completely agree is the cloaking. It doesn't feel as Klingon, so that's one thing against them that I'm not a huge fan of. But I also love their ideals. I love that they're very honorable and very respectful to a certain extent. And I always wanted to learn Klingon, so that's why Klingons are my number one.
They are also my number one for a lot of the same reasons. They're so developed. There's so much there. Their culture is so rich. Everything I love that you touched on, like the weaponry, the food, the drink, the ship designs. Like there's such a personality to everything about them because they're so present throughout Trek, and so it's kind of an easy call for me. And the other thing about them too is that there are so many good characters that are Klingon, that come from the Klingon race. It's not like a one couple character list here. It's Worf, it's Martok, it's Gowron, it's Kalar, it's B'Elanna Torres, it's Duras, it's there's so many. You can go on and on. All the Klingons from the original series: Kor, Kang,
Lursa and Bator.
Endless. Lursa and Bator. Like, there's so many choices. I love the Klingon, honestly. Like, I'm not a huge fan of Prophecy from season 7 of Voyager, but I like that main Klingon. I like the actor who plays him. I think he's like a classic Klingon. And yeah, I they get knocked on, I think, for being overused sometimes. People are like, oh, I'm tired of the Klingons. They're in it all the time. I didn't even name like Chang and Gorkin, Krug, but like there's so many angles to it. There's so many different kinds of Klingons, and I actually think a lot about. It's not really explored much, but it's hinted at in the episode of Enterprise Judgment. The Klingon lawyer for Archer talks about. He gives this great like little monologue about not all Klingons are from the warrior caste. You know, there's this whole other section of Klingon society that we don't necessarily see, and I'm hopeful that in a couple of weeks we might get some looks at different kinds of
Discovery.
So I think there's even more love to come heading the Klingons' way. So yeah, they're kind of indispensable to me. I think they're so integral. Again, like I've said about the other species, like the Vulcans especially, the Klingons are a part of Star Trek's DNA. Like Star Trek is what it is partially because of the Klingons. You know, Star Trek, the original series in the '60s, a lot of people saw it through the lens of, you know, a commentary on the times the Klingons are the Russians, all that stuff that everybody who loves Star Trek kind of knows about. Yeah. So like their presence in that way kind of helped establish Star Trek's identity and long-term, you know, longevity. So yeah, it sounds easy. It sounds like, oh, it's like a canned answer. The Klingons are the best species. But I think when I really sat down, I really tried to figure out a way to like change it up and pick something different. But I kept talking myself back into the Klingons. So just for their rich history and culture and different characters and great episodes, Sins of the Father, Reunion, you know, Barge of the Dead from Deep Space Nine, and you know, just all the exploration that they get in Deep Space Nine, you know, the way of the warrior, and we see a Klingon wedding, which Dan's gonna obviously be studying a lot in the next few months. he's working on his lovely fiance, I'm sure, to have as many Klingon influences as possible.
Are your best men going to be like Bashir and O'Brien going to attack you?
You need to keep going back to that episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're an easy call for me for number one. So yeah.
Yep. So maybe just I guess recap your list real fast.
Rob, do you want to do yours real quick?
Yep.
Yep. So my number 5 was Species 116, which was Arcturus from Hope and Fear and Voyager. My number 4 was the Vorta. My number 3 was the Trill, specifically Join Trill. Number 2 were the Cardassians, and number 1 was the Vidians.
Great list.
Okay, yeah, that's an awesome list. So for my top 5, number 5, Voyager round, I went with the Hirogen. Number 4 was Andorians. Number 3 was also the Trill, specifically Join Trill. Number 2 was Vulcans, and number 1 was Klingons.
Yeah. And for me, my number 5 was the Vidians. My number 4 was the Bajorans. Number 3 was the Cardassians. Number 2 was the Vulcans. And number 1 was the Klingons. Mm-hmm. Do we want to go around real quick and just throw off a couple of others that were like just barely missing? Do you have any that are like anything that we didn't name already that you thought about actually throwing on there? Danielle, actually, real quick, but I guess before we do that, is asking us about the Ferengi. So I guess I'll phrase it this way: Did anyone toy with the idea of the Ferengi on your list? No.
I like them as I like them as a species, but there was on my list.
The Ferengi are frustrating to me. I like them conceptually. I like the idea of them. I like what they try to explore. I do not like them much in TNG. I love Quark. I love Rom. I love Nog.
Yeah.
So I love what they do in Deep Space Nine, but I often, and I know Enterprise Extra, who's in here, will agree with me on this, I tend not to like the Ferengi-centric episodes very much. Some of them are better than others. I love the Magnificent Ferengi. I think Family Business is okay. But, you know, Prophet and Lace, Ferengi love songs, episodes like that, I'm not super high on, and I don't tend to go back to them very often. So Rules of Acquisition, episodes like that. So they kind of are like a enigma for me. They're a challenge for me to get onto my list because I struggle to find episodes and stuff to justify them appearing. And I think they're really kind of weak in TNG. I know a lot of people like Rascals, but I think their takeover of the Enterprise and Rascals is like the most ridiculous, laughable, like just absurd thing ever in Star Trek. With this 1,000-crew ship with like state-of-the-art security with Worf
Yeah.
taken over by like 3 loser Ferengi.
Yeah.
It's just like ridiculous. But so I couldn't justify it. But I love Quark. I really do. I love that whole family dynamic. Quark, Rom, Nog. And I like them in small doses, I guess I'll say.
Yeah.
And I like them when they're not necessarily like their society isn't necessarily the focus of the episode, which I guess is all I need to say about why they're not. If I can't get down with the episodes that like explore their society and their culture, then I guess that's why they're on. That's why they're not on my list. They did produce one of the better characters in Trek history, I think.
Yeah. Trekker Prize makes a good point. That's purely the comedy relief. That's probably makes it for me at least as well.
And it gives you Ferengi give you through Nog give you the that Trek ideal of completely different people with different values and ideals that they are able to get along, which is surely the whole point of Star Trek, which is great. But they are a hard species to love. But weirdly, that the characters we see the most of the Ferengi are they're not really. I mean, they are at times. They're greedy. They're sexist. Profit orientated. But they're not. Those 3 aren't really. At times, they're actually noble, courageous, honourable. Yeah, it's so the characters more than the species. I think I like.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I mean, if we were doing an episode on characters, like our favorite characters, there's so many. It's hard to do this, but I think Quark would be in my conversation for top of the list because he is so complicated. I love what he represents. I love his conversation with Garak about the Federation and the Way of the Warrior. I think is like an all-time great Star Trek scene about how the Federation like rubs off on you the more you're around it. It quietly assimilates you, and it's great. It's his arc is amazing, like many of the Deep Space Nine characters. But yeah, they even Dr. Rega from TNG, Trekker Prize says, wasn't a conventional Ferengi, a scientist who actually wasn't driven by profit. So yeah, Rega, they did occasionally delve into other sides of the Ferengi. That's true, and that is kind of like a linchpin to one of the reasons I picked a lot of the species I did. That we got different angles on species; they weren't all uniform. So yeah, I can't lie and say that I didn't think of them. It's not like they were completely absent from my thought process, but tough to make the cut with some of the ones I had ahead of them, I should say.
I wonder whether the Ferengi would have been more appreciated if we'd seen them later on in their history, like after Nog becomes Rom becomes Grand Nagus.
Maybe
once we'd seen a bit more evolution of
how does Ferengi society change with him?
Yeah.
Head. Yeah, I agree. I think they could stand for more development. I'd like to see what's going on with Nog, Grand Nagus Nog, or Grand Nagus Rom. We have Rom as Grand Nagus, and we have a representative in the Federation who, in Starfleet, who played like a big role in the Dominion War. So, they're good. I can't sit here. I enjoy a lot about the Ferengi, especially in Deep Space Nine. I'm not going to sit here and say I hate them. I do. I don't hate them. I like them a lot, but not quite strong enough to make the top 5. What about you guys though? With like barely missed, anybody like just barely off your list that you like tried to get on but couldn't figure out a way?
For me, it was like Tribbles because it's so iconic. But also
for a Vulcan.
changelings were kind of
Yeah,
Yeah,
were
that was on my.
almost there because I love this just
Yeah,
sci-fi concept. I love
yeah,
um, the all the characters. But yeah, the changelings were there, almost there.
yeah.
yeah. I had the changelings as almost one, but then I tried to go with my theme of being a bit out there and not picking such obvious ones or picking one-off species. So yeah, I thought about the Voth. They were really interesting. And even something really like that's almost non-humanoid, something like the macrovirus in Macrocosm. That's a really bizarre
Yeah.
one-off alien, or another one was Tosk from Captive Pursuit in DS9. He was a really interesting species. The way that he's being hunted, the fact that he can camouflage. There's so many. You could talk about species until till you're blue in the face. The Vaudois,
Yeah.
really interesting. I thought really
Oh,
interesting.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Yep.
A couple that barely missed mine that I toyed with, but I ended up falling on the side of, am I thinking about the character more than the species? Where the Andorians,
Yeah.
I love the Andorians, I really do, but I found myself thinking more like through Shran specifically, so it kind of pushed me away from that a little bit. They were close though; they were right there. And the other one that I really toyed with, but again is I think more character than species, is Q.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love the whole idea of the Q continuum, but a couple things. I think again it's the character, not the species, and I also think that TOS especially explores a lot of those like godlike, omnipotent species. I don't know how different the Q is, other than we get to know Q over time,
Yeah.
than some of those other beings that we get in TOS, Trelane, the Metrons, things like that. But Q is certainly, a Lynch, like a great guest character, bigger than just a guest character. He's a great foil for Picard, and I love the idea of the Continuum. I love what we get with Continuum, how we get to know a little bit more about the Continuum in episodes like Deja Q and Death Wish from Voyager is probably my favorite of that type.
Mhm.
But couldn't quite justify it. And the one that really came close, that's not quite that way, is the Xindi. I love the Xindi. I love the idea of the Xindi. I love the science fiction idea of this, um, 5 species that evolve differently, and the infighting and the politics and stuff is interesting to me. And I think it was kind of just the shot of energy that Enterprise needed at that time. So yeah, they were in the conversation for me. Couldn't figure out a way to get them in, but they were there. A species that none of us mentioned at all, that I'm kind of curious if any of you toyed with before we kind of move on, is the Romulans. Did anyone toy with Romulans?
I was just thinking that nobody's mentioned the Romulans. And
No.
Yeah, I didn't have them on my list. Yeah, not sure why.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah,
I can't really give a definitive reason why not. A lot of their episodes are really good.
That's the reason they want you. That's the reason they don't want you to know.
I know they don't want us to know. Yeah, I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. We never really get to know much about their culture. I guess I don't want to say that like Nemesis left such a bad taste in my mouth that like the missed opportunity that was Nemesis with the Romulans, that it kind of pushes them down. But yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of the time they're because of their closed-minded, they're closed off society. We don't get to know them much. We don't get to know what's really going on behind the scenes very often. So that's kind of what pushed a lot of these up my list, is that we get all these different angles on each species, and Romulans can be a little one note, I guess, sometimes. So, hey Danielle, thank you very much for stopping by.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by.
Glad you made the time.
Yep.
So I guess one thing that I know, because I think I led in the show, like I led into the main topic. Before we like wrap this up, Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, tell us about your fandom. How did you learn to love Trek? Anything you want to tell us? what do you have going on? Like, what do you have to share?
Projects or
Yeah, anything exciting going on in your Trek world?
So how did I get into Star Trek? I think it's probably quite common with a lot of people I hear. Like, I think my growing up wasn't the easiest for me. I had a lot of family stuff going on. So I think Star Trek provided like a sense of security and comfort and stability, familiarity, and escapism. So it was kind of there for me in the difficult times.
Yeah.
And more recently it has been. So yeah, and also I watched Star Trek when I was growing up with my dad. So it was the kind of thing that we shared. We both sat down and watched it. Yeah, and I love the characters, love the stories, and I think Star Trek provides a sense of, for me, it's the values, the ideals, the justice, the principles. So yeah, that's why Star Trek's important to me, and kind of how I got into it. I went through a bit of a gap with Star Trek. I watched it a lot when I was 11, 12, 13. Then I went through a period of not watching it as much. And in the last couple of years, I've kind of like rekindled my love of Star Trek. And what's really good recently is being able to connect with other fans that you didn't get that when 10, 15 years ago or longer. So it's been great connecting with people like you guys and some of the people that have been in the chat, like Trekker Prize and Enterprise Extra and Ross, and it's great to connect with fans. So that's how I got into Trek, and projects, things that I've been doing. So I've been. I was a few months ago. I won a competition to be on a Trek FM roundtable, and it was on Trek books. And I hadn't really read many Trek books. I'd only listened to the one audiobook that's the audiobook's done by it's narrated by Kate Mulgrew. I can't even remember the name of it now. People are going to be screaming at me, but Mosaic. That's it, Mosaic. So I'm trying to get into Trek books and read more Trek books, and I've started a Trek book club. So for kind of like I don't know if anyone's takes part in Star Trek Hour on Twitter. It's kind of like that, where we choose a book, we read it separately, and then we come together and then discuss the book, what the characters, what we liked, what we didn't like, the story, what happened, on Twitter. So we've done one book so far, which was Deep Space Nine Avatar Book 1, which was part of the DS9 relaunch series, which takes place immediately after the end of season 7. So so it's really interesting to find out what happens to DS9 post what we've seen through the TV show. So that's what I'm doing. I've got a Trek book club, and you can follow it on Twitter. It's at Trek Book Club. And yeah, if you're interested in reading some Trek books, talking about them, come join in. It'd be great to have you.
Cool. Yeah, that was a great idea for you to put together.
Awesome idea.
Really neat, different, great way for people to connect and like have a shared experience. So, great call.
Yeah, but it was the first one. It was good fun. We had quite a few people join in and different questions, and it was really good. Good fun.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but you had a very special person.
Yeah. I'm glad you. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, we had Nog join in from Deep Space Nine.
Eisenberg.
Yeah, it was, and it wasn't just like a one-off comment. He actually joined in and responded to quite a few of the discussions and questions. It was brilliant. So fingers crossed we can get a few other people.
That's really cool.
That'd be cool. Even some of maybe so I think there's already a Discovery book out or coming out soon.
Yeah, pre-order. You can pre-order it.
Yeah. Perhaps we can hopefully get some of the cast, because some of the cast on Discovery are really active. Like Anthony Rapp's really active on social media. He's really cool. So it'd be great to have some of them commenting.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find you? Specific.
So on Twitter I'm at Trekkie Rob. you can find me, and I'm always talking Star Trek. Yeah, feel free to contact me, or
Yeah,
always open.
his Twitter will be linked down, and it is linked in the description right now. So if you guys have any questions about Star Trek in general or the book club, his Twitter is down in the description.
Yeah, feel free to hit me up with some questions, or if you're interested in taking part, or anything Star Trek related.
One thing I want to throw out there, I know I speak for Dan too. I just want to thank you for all your support, even like going way back to the beginning of our little project here, and you've been there for us right from the beginning, and you were there with us in episode 1, and and have been there, pretty much all along the way, and we can't thank you enough for being there for us and supporting us and helping us get the word out that we're here doing our thing. So thank you.
My pleasure. It's I love what you're doing. It's great. It's so much fun. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. You've been such a great friend of the the project and the network. So we hope you've had a good experience on this show. We hope to maybe in the future bring you back and have you on another show. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You'll be back.
Yeah.
What about is non Star Trek things anyone's been doing? Has anyone been? So I know for myself, I've been I've got back into rewatching Battlestar Galactica.
That's a show that Bill should start, or if he I don't know if you have seen it, but
I have, and I love it. It's probably it is my favorite like science fiction show that's not Trek. But it's been years since I've really dived in, so that's one that I would kind of be a natural choice for maybe filling in this time. Post full rewatch. That's on the short list. I've been watching movies a good bit these last couple of days, like catching up on movies that I've missed in the last few months since the beginning of the year. But the Battlestar Galactica is definitely a very real possibility for me to dive back into, because it's a great show for anybody out there who hasn't taken the leap.
Yeah, it's
highly recommend it.
Yeah, it's frustrating though, because in the States at least they took it off to Netflix.
It did.
Yeah.
I have it on Blu-ray. So
okay.
I'm lucky there. But Netflix is very convenient.
Yeah.
That stinks.
Yeah. Just kind of wrapping up, have you guys listened to any other Star Trek content that you guys like to mention, talk about? I know I have a few, if you want me to start off.
Yeah, go for it.
So I listened to Primitive Culture, which is a Trek FM podcast, and it's quietly becoming one of my favorite podcasts to listen to, besides Trek Ranks, obviously. But this week they talked about Die Hard and action films, and how that compares to Star Trek, and an episode from TNG and an episode from Voyager. And I thought that was an interesting topic, because I was like, Die Hard, like what? No. But when they started to talk about it in the action genre, and how there's some action-y episodes in Star Trek, it was just a great discussion and a great listen. So I definitely recommend Primitive Culture. I think it's called
it's a great show.
I think.
But
it was a great episode. So that's one I wanted to mention, and in my closing thoughts.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rob. You get it.
What have I been listening to? So Trek Ranks, obviously.
Yeah.
I haven't checked out their. I think is it top 5 or top Klingon episodes? Is it?
Yeah.
I'm going to check that out. But I listened to their top 5 Data episodes, and I had a few. I think I contributed a few ideas to that. That was really, so they're really cool. Their podcast is brilliant. Definitely check them out if you haven't. What else? We had Trekker Price is with us now. His YouTube channel is brilliant. Definitely check that out. He has a at the moment he's doing some great data files on different characters. I think he's going alphabetically through the list. So
Oh, cool. Nice.
That's awesome.
definitely
We'll check that out.
check him out. He's got some great videos. And what else? I'm trying to think. There's some guys I'm collaborating with my Trek Book Club that we're doing. They run their own podcast called 10 Backward, and they some of their episodes are really good. I think recently they explored war in Trek, and I think currently they're looking at. I haven't listened to it, but I'm definitely going to. They're doing an Enterprise season 1 rewatch analysis.
Music's my ears.
Definitely check them out. They're really cool. And I was lucky enough. They invited me on to fairly recently to discuss a TOS episode, which was really good. Which is a really random, bizarre episode. It was the Savage Curtain. If you haven't seen it, it's bizarre.
Yeah.
All I'll say is Abraham Lincoln in space.
Abraham Lincoln.
Yeah.
It's yeah, and the dynamic duo of Abraham Lincoln fighting Kahless. so
Amazing,
odd.
right? Amazing.
Yeah. So
Only in Star Trek.
Yeah, only in
Yeah.
Star Trek.
Well, because I'm trying to get into the original series and I haven't watched it all through. They brought me on for a TOS episode. I think they hastily apologized for introducing me to such a terrible episode of TOS. But it wasn't terrible. There were some good
It
things.
has
about
moments.
Yeah.
It does. It definitely does. It
It explores some cool Trek canon. It introduces
Yeah.
Kahless. It introduces
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarek, is it?
Zarek.
Yeah.
Serac.
No.
Serac.
Sarek. Yes. Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And introduces him and Colonel Green. Like, there's some cool stuff in it for sure.
There is.
But it's
Yeah.
one of the more out there, like, whoa, like, can't believe they're going there.
Yeah.
Episodes.
Yeah. That's the thing I love about Star Trek. Even the episodes that are there are never any bad episodes. There are just episodes that are not as good as the ones that are fantastic. They're all great. And you can find something good about even the ones that you think, episodes like that are quite commonly unpopular, like Threshold, or
Precious
you can find good
Cargo.
things.
Precious Cargo. Yep.
You can find good things about any episode. They're all great. Yeah.
If you embrace the setting and the positive vibe of the show and the characters, like if you fall in love with just Star Trek as a whole, even the weaker episodes, you find cause to, like, it's comfort television, kind of like you were talking about and why you're a fan. Like, to me, it's like comfort food. It's the easiest kind of escapism. Even if it's not good, it's like spending time with your friends and family.
Exactly.
Even when it's not good, it gets the job done.
I forgot Fairhaven in that list. I know that's a commonly unpopular one, but I quite like Fairhaven.
I like Fairhaven, kind of. I'm higher on it than some. I'm not high on Spirit Boat, the second one.
Right. Yep.
But the first time they introduced that, I'm okay with some of the Janeway stuff in it. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you saw recently there was a I think someone released, I think it was Netflix actually, in the UK. They released a list of the most watched Star Trek episodes on Netflix.
Yeah.
So really odd list.
It is. A lot of Voyager.
Yeah, I think one of the Voyager episodes was was it Time and Again? Which I wouldn't have thought was. It's a good episode, but it's not. I wouldn't have thought that would be the one of the most watched.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was quite interesting.
Kind of, it's an interesting list for sure. Game was the top one.
Yeah, I think Scorpion was on.
Scorpion, yeah. Time and Again, like you said. Yeah, it was very interesting to see that. A lot of unexpected choices.
Wait, Endgame was the top one?
Yeah, Endgame was the most rewatched.
How dare they?
I know. You're not a fan. Yeah. You're not a very forgiving of Endgame, Dan. Yeah. Real quick for me, just to chime in with like a couple. You had mentioned it earlier, Rob. To the Journey episode on the Void. I listened to that the other night, and it was very good. I love that episode, and it was my first time listening to the Journey in a while, and it was refreshing to dive back into that show.
Yeah, it's a great podcast, and definitely, I mean, the guys that are doing it now are great, are really, really good. I think it's Kay, Zachary, and Suzanne. But
Yeah.
if you haven't gone back, the previous hosts, Tristan and Charlene, were
the best.
just great. Yeah, they're brilliant. Definitely go back and watch some of their episodes if you haven't. I think along with you guys at Trek Live, it was you, a mixture of you, Trekker Prize, and To the Journey, and Trek FM that kind of got me back into Trek. So
great.
That's good.
So
Awesome.
Love to hear that.
So I owe you a huge debt of gratitude.
Well, we appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Can't think of a kinder compliment for sure. That's what we aim to do here.
Yeah.
If we can, if our love of it can rub off on you a little bit, then we did our job.
Definitely has.
Re-energize. Yeah. And the same for you, Dan, the episode that you mentioned of Primitive Culture. Primitive Culture, along with you, I totally am with you. It's quickly becoming like maybe my favorite non-Trek Ranks, of course. Trek Ranks legitimately really is. I'm not just saying this, and I know you're not either.
No.
It really is like my favorite.
It's a favorite.
It's the one that I most quickly, if I'm free, if I have like, if I don't listen to it right away, it's because I can't divert my attention to it enough. Like it's not something I want to passively listen to. I want to really be able to enjoy it. Yeah, savor it. I have to listen to it at a time where I can really enjoy it.
Yeah.
So that's my number one. But Primitive Culture is like right behind it. It's similar. I also like have to listen to that at like the right time because it's so rich and full of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And that was a great episode on Die Hard and
Microcosm.
Macrocosm and
That was
Alien.
episode. Alien, yeah.
Yep. Really good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jordan, you better stay safe. He's popping in. He's in Florida, like right in the path.
Oh yeah, Jordan, stay safe, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep your head down.
Yep.
I think that pretty much wraps it up for me. I don't really have much else. We've covered everything.
Yep.
You guys have any closing thoughts? Last things you want to throw out there?
Specifically about alien species?
Anything.
Just anything.
Anything. I mean, Dan, are you still on Star Trek Online? Are you still playing that?
Probably not today. Because I have something today, which, this week for sure I'm gonna be, because I said last week that's gonna return next week. This week it will return. I'm excited to keep that tracking along. I think it's been a really fun time to just come hang out.
Yeah, I've played a bit over the last week. I've upgraded my ship, so if there's anyone that wants to come hang out on Star Trek Online, let us know. It's a fun game.
Yep. The thing I'll say is, obviously, you guys know the drill. The discussion does not have to stop here. Definitely encourage you, if you guys are watching this after the fact, definitely join in live. It's always a great time. Next week, we are talking about Voyager recap, which I'm super excited to talk about. So that'll be episode 24, and then obviously episode 25. The big 2-5 will be about Discovery, because that is the Discovery weekend. So be looking forward to that. So we're definitely getting down to the nitty gritty. In the coming weeks, we'll definitely talk about scheduling, some new content, which is
Cool
gonna
new
be
ideas.
which is gonna be fun. So definitely be
I
excited.
can't wait.
Yeah.
As if we haven't got enough with Star Trek to talk about.
Yeah.
So we have some unique stuff coming.
Yeah.
Different kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They keep your ears peeled, and yeah, we have good stuff coming for sure. I can't wait. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So if you guys don't have anything to say, I'd like to again thank Rob for coming on the
Yeah.
show. We had a great
Thank you.
time, great discussion.
Yeah, thanks
Awesome
for having me. Really
choices.
enjoyed it.
Yeah. Definitely come find us on Twitter if you guys have any further questions. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for coming.
See you later. Bye.